Hello hijackers and highwaymen, my name is TBSKine, and a while back at BlizzCon, a new hero was announced for Overwatch. At the time, I didn't really have the time to talk about her much, but now that December is rearing its ugly head and Christmas music is starting to invade all of our collective eardrums, I finally have a bit of an opening in my schedule. So, what is the deal with Ashe, and to a lesser extent, B.O.B? So, we're gonna start with the story. Elizabeth Caledonia Calamity Ashe was born into power and privilege. She's the son of the scion of a wealthy family, where she grew up surrounded by money and power and prestige, but at a somewhat substantial deficit of parental care, love, and affection. Disillusioned with this, she started acting out, and over the course of acting out, she managed to run into one Jesse McCree, with whom eventually, and 3 others, she would eventually found the Deadlock Gang, a very infamous outlaw outfit running around the southern states of the United States, stealing things, robbing people, pulling off daring heists, and generally engaging in rather thrill-seeking behavior. Now, Ashe, as a gang leader, found that a lot of the skills that she had earned or learned from just observing her parents and being around that business life served her pretty well in just kind of keeping a gang together, managing operations, making sure that costs are kept in line and forming alliances and making sure that she's not constantly bogged down in pointless gang wars over territory and stuff like that. And so Ashe is a little bit of an odd duck in the Overwatch universe for a couple of reasons. First of all, because she doesn't really seem to have much of a connection to the Overwatch universe at large. Her main connection to anything else that happens in Overwatch is Jesse McCree, a former associate with whom she split when he decided to join Blackwatch and eventually Overwatch. And since then, she doesn't seem to have any specific contact with Talon. She doesn't have any specific relationship with Overwatch itself. She doesn't seem to have any particular connection to the Omnic human crisis that's sort of an ongoing question in the Overwatch universe. She doesn't really seem to pass any kind of commentary or offer any specific world-building insight into the main themes of Overwatch as they have been presented so far. She's also a little bit unusual in that she's one of the few characters in Overwatch who really doesn't have to be there. In a very literal sense, she's someone who's an outlaw because she wanted to be. It's not like Genji, who kind of didn't have much of a choice except to become a cyborg ninja after he was nearly assassinated by his brother and his body was rebuilt into a cyborg ninja. There's a lot of characters in Overwatch who are there because they have a calling, a mission in life, something that they must accomplish, some grand quest or moral conviction about a thing that they must accomplish in the world, whereas Ashe is like, I just want to blow shit up and steal things and have fun and do stuff, which is a little bit unusual because Overwatch generally has had an approach where even joke heroes like Hammond pass some kind of commentary on the central questions in the Overwatch mythology, like specifically that tension about what constitutes a person and what do we do with people once we have declared them persons. Like that's at the heart of the human Omnic conflict, is this thing of human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Can they coexist? Can they both be people? Can you have a world where these two types of living creatures exist alongside each other? Like Bastion is a great example of this, in that he's a mindless killing machine it is a mindless killing machine that develops a personality, that develops a personhood. And so the question you have to ask, whereas all the other Bastion units of these mindless killing machines just marching into hell and combat, is Bastion a person now? Torbjorn certainly seems to think so in some of the lore content around him, and Hammond is the same way. Like, whereas Winston is very clearly just a human who happens to have a gorilla body and like peanut butter and bananas and stuff like that, Hammond is a hamster. And he's a hamster with an extremely powerful genius intelligence, but he's still a hamster nonetheless. And so the question at the heart of Hammond's character is again this thing of, does that constitute, like, is he an animal? Or is he a person? Is he someone who you must consider a person for, for the purposes of having a moral discourse about who he is? And again, Ashe, kind of not so much. Really not so much. And part of the reason for that might be that, at least according to some of the information that's come out since her reveal, she was never really conceived to be an Overwatch hero in the first place. She was a character in the reunion short, the animated short that they put out, specifically focusing around McCree, who got kind of elevated to main hero status just because the team, spending time with her, developing her, found that she was so interesting and fun and compelling that, hey, let's just put her in the game. That's a thing we can do. And so they did. And I kind of like that, honestly. Like, I know a lot of people were kind of annoyed by her just randomly being elevated to a main character when she was just supposed to be a secondary character. But I kind of like that that's a thing that can happen in Overwatch. Like, that the Overwatch team still feel they have the creative freedom to just sometimes just, we think this is cool and we wanted to do it. That's good. I like that. Not to say that there aren't criticisms you can make of the character choice that they made, but I like that that kind of spontaneity, essentially, is still possible. Although I don't doubt that she's done very well, like, on the financial side for the company as well, between skins and stuff like that. So, let's talk about Ashe as, I think there's two main readings you can have on Ashe as a character. On the one hand, she is a spoiled little rich girl, a wealthy, privileged little lady from the top of society, playing cops and robbers, running around with a gang to get back at mommy and daddy because they never gave her enough attention as a child. They didn't come to my birthday, and so now I'm gonna be a rebel and carry on a teenage rebellion until she's almost 40 years old, to the point where you might start to wonder, is it not time, perhaps, young lady, that you grew up and got over yourself? That's one possible way to read her. The other way to read her is that she's someone who was born into wealth and privilege and found that that wealth and privilege came without the emotional warmth and the human connection that people kind of need in order for life to be worth living, and so she rejects her life of privilege, she rejects the money, she rejects the wealth, she rejects the status, and goes out and creates a family for herself, where she can find that love and affection and companionship that she never got from her biological family. I bit my tongue earlier today, and I've got a blister now, and it's messing with my diction. Someone who goes out and creates a life for herself that she wants to live, rather than just blindly accepting the life that's handed to her on a silver platter. And what's interesting to me about the way that Ashe is presented in Overwatch is that the game kind of doesn't really take sides in that issue. Is she a spoiled little rich daddy's girl just playing at being an outlaw, playing at being a bandit in order to get back at her parents? Or is she a driven, motivated person who is, you know, creating a life for herself in spite of the position that she was born into? There's a number of things that speak for either side, and one of the things that is kind of important in this context is B.O.B, because B.O.B is the one thing from her previous life that she brought with her into the outlaw life. B.O.B is always there. Here he is in the background, literally holding, you know, refreshments for her on a silver platter as she practices shooting skills that will come in handy in her life of crime. Next up, he's outside the police station where Ashe's parents clearly have failed to turn up, waiting for her with an umbrella as she walks out from having been scolded and presumably bailed out by her parents. And then eventually, as we head into the game itself, he's the constant companion, the guy who's always watching her back, a remnant of her previous life, a person who she only has, a butler. Like, that's very much what B.O.B is. He's literally a butler who follows her around everywhere, a person who she only has in her life because her parents were wealthy enough to engage an omnic butler specifically for her. He's very much a symbol of the life of privilege that she left behind, but he's also something that she's very clearly repurposed and integrated into her new life. So she's holding on to some aspect of that privileged upbringing, even as she's trying to reject it in other ways. On the other hand, especially in the reunion short that she has with McCree, it's made very, very clear that Ashe's main interest is not, she doesn't talk about, yeah, this will show my dad or this will show my parents. She is in this game for herself. She's in this because she wants to steal and she wants to pull off heists and she wants to have the big score. She wants to have that excitement. That's the thing that drives her. So it's not really about her parents, it's about herself and her own goals. How you want to interpret that character, I think, is going to be very much up to the reader, or the player, as the case may be. It's gonna be up to you, and that's interesting, because, like, there's a lot of Overwatch characters where there aren't really, you can't really do a reading that constructs the character as just kind of sad and pathetic at the same time as they are a complete stone cold badass. Like Tracer rather, pretty unambiguously heroic and good and kind, and you know, the world can always use more heroes. Like there's not a lot of ambiguity there. There's not a lot of ambiguity with Winston, who's like, he's an animal who was experimented on by humans and who chose to become a super scientist for the common good. Not a lot of ambiguity in that character, but with Ashe, there is actually quite a lot of ambiguity to talk about, especially when it comes to representations of stuff like wealth, money, privilege, class in the Overwatch universe, which is a discussion for a different video, deeply outside the scope of this one in particular. So, let's move on to character design. Ashe has a pretty good character design, I think, overall. Like, she still has the Overwatch lady body, which is, like, you know, most sort of primarily... Let's see if we can find this shot here. It's a fairly standard, slender Overwatch, like, video game fantasy hero prototype number 5 with, you know, with the hips that are pretty obvious, and she's got a sort of slender waist and bit of an hourglass figure going on, and she's all looking very pretty, and she's got a sharp face and nice proportions, and like she's physically rather indistinguishable from like most of the other Overwatch girls, which is a point of criticism. Like that was the best they could do, apparently, is just do that body type again rather than maybe come up with something else. Like I don't know, just make her tall and fat, I don't know, something. It's a little bit boring just seeing the same Overwatch girl over and over again in different costumes and telling me that she's a different character. There's a lot of design space being wasted, but I have a whole other video about that that's really old and I should really redo it. Anyway, Ashe is a rich girl. She comes from wealth and privilege, and she carries that history with her. We already talked about how B.O.B, being her literal butler, represents that history to a large extent, but also her outfit is designed to evoke a lot of those same ideas as well. She wears... First of all, there's a lot of gold in her outfit. Not ostentatiously, not sort of over-the-top gold on everything, but there's a lot of golden colors from, like, the badge on her hat to the color of, you know, the accents on her gun, as well as the little patches and trimming going on in her tie, on her jacket, her belt buckle, around her is a glove she's wearing there? This thing, whatever the heck that is. Like, there's a lot of gold accenting going on, which is, you know, the most common thing to do in order to denote wealth, is to put gold on a character. That's the easiest way to communicate that idea. She's also wearing a rather posh outfit for an backwater desert outlaw kind of character. She's got this tie and thing going on with a high collar that kind of evokes her school uniform from the origin story short. If we go here, you can see it's essentially she's wearing the same thing. She's wearing the same outfit she was wearing in private school, just kind of jazzed up a little bit, which gives her this kind of regal, like, not regal, but certainly an upper class posh bearing. This is not a dirty, dusty, kind of grimy outfit of the lower classes. No, this is the outfit of a high class criminal. And the same thing goes for her boots, which are interesting in that they evoke, to me at least, riding boots of the kind that you would typically see on, like, Victorian aristocracy, out for a day's riding and a good day's hunting. Yes, pip pip, terrio, tally-ho, and all that. With lacing going on all the way up and down the boots that evokes, to me at least, the idea of corsetry, like the lacing on the back of a corset. And so all of that kind of combines to give her this weird juxtaposition of, on the one hand, being the outlaw desperada Jessie Jane cowgirl with a gun, defending her land and, you know, taking down scurrilous scalawags and scoundrels who don't, you know, listen to what a woman has to say. And on the other hand, also being this very upper class, high class, oh yes, from the rich and privileged classes indeed. And that tension is very, very well embodied in her outfit, in that she's got the practical aspects of the belts and, you know, the tool pouch and the skull buckle going on, as well as the glove out things that she's got going on her shooting arm, giving her a sort of utilitarian look, juxtaposed with the extremely tightly controlled management of her look, with the, you know, the long waistcoat and, you know, the shirt and tie combo with the vest over top of it, which is an extremely highly controlled expression of image. And speaking of controlled expressions of image, let's talk about makeup on Overwatch characters for a second, because I'll be honest, I'm a little bit... I talked about how I'm tired of all the Overwatch girls having essentially the same body figure. I'm also kind of tired of every single goddamn Overwatch girl having her makeup constantly on point. Now, the function of these, powerful winged eyeliners and stuff like that, when it comes to character design, at least in part, is that they function as a shorthand for femininity. Like, that's certainly in Western cartooning, and indeed also in anime and manga, the best shorthand you can possibly have for femininity in a character is to give them makeup. Like, it's just a symbol that's associated with that, and I think that's pretty much how it's used in Ashe. She's supposed to be extremely feminine in her expression while wearing an outfit that is, on the other hand, mostly male-coded. Like, she's got the tie, the collared shirt, the vest thing, the belt, the boots, all of that is substantially more masculine coded, and so the makeup is there to provide a contrasting feminine element to her character design. That makes sense, but on the other hand, the other part of makeup that's kind of important to keep in mind is that makeup is a symbol of wealth, power, privilege, and control, and it always has been, especially in the West. When you think of people who wear an extreme amount of makeup throughout history, not in the modern day, because that can include pretty much everyone, but people who historically have been associated most with high levels of makeup, you think of the aristocracy, you think of the upper class, and so the makeup does do a good job of, again, conveying the fact that Ashe is coming from a position of wealth and privilege and power and so on and so forth, that she is from a rich family, but on the other hand, it's also like she's an outlaw leader of a gang of, Wild West riders out in the desert on their motorbikes, cruising through the desert and blowing shit up and stealing stuff. So why does she have makeup? Like, why is that a priority for her? One of the things she's doing as a person is rejecting that past, is rejecting that connection to wealth and aristocracy and, that tightly controlled life that she didn't want because there was no love in it. There was no freedom in it. There was no personal human connection in it. So why is she very specifically choosing to bring along the ritual of putting on the makeup, of putting on the face of power to her outlaw life? Like, it seems like if the whole thing is that she's an outlaw, desert-dwelling, heart-talking, heart-drinking, heart-shooting, all of that, why is she so goddamn clean? Why is she wearing her makeup? This, to me, seems like a missed opportunity, because I think the contrast between the rich, privileged upbringing and her present-day outlaw persona, I think that contrast would be much better served if her outfit, while containing all the same elements, was also dirty, beaten up, dusty, just kind of looked like it had been through a hard day's motorbike riding through the desert, like it had been through multiple firefights without necessarily being retailored every single goddamn time. Like, if it looked like it was someone who lived this hard, free, wild life for herself on her own terms without being constrained by the symbols and the visual signifiers of class and privilege, that they were beaten up, rusty, scraped. In fact, if they looked a lot more like what the hell B.O.B is wearing. Now, B.O.B, in contrast to Ashe, he has battle damage. He has wear and tear on him. He is wearing an outfit that looks like it's been through a hard day's riding. He is wearing something that looks like, holy, well, this is a dude who does dirty work every single day, who lives in a rough environment and who doesn't really have time to clean and take care of themselves in overly extensive ways. B.O.B looks a lot more like that embodied contrast because he's got the bowler hat and he's got the impeccable mustache thing going on, evoking that sort of more aristocratic past as well as a Wild West set of imagery. But he's also got the dirt and the wear and the tear and the grit and the grub and just the ugliness that comes with a life devoid of that wealth and privilege and power. And if that had transferred more onto Ashe, I think her design would just have worked better. I think it would have looked better if they had embraced a little less of this and a little more of that. Of this kind of slightly more scuffed up, kind of ruffled, loosened up look instead of that very tightly controlled thing. Now, where they're going to go with Ashe, with narrative in the future, I don't know. Like, maybe they're going to make the point. This right here, for example. Speaking of makeup, I think it would have been much more effective. Like, maybe, okay, if you want Ashe to absolutely have that long winged eyeliner in order to provide that femininity contrast, okay, but then have her makeup be all messed up. Like, just have her makeup be completely screwed up and, like, running, and it's been smudged out, and Like there's stuff going on which would give her that slightly more wild, kind of crazy look to her. Like that might be a way to do it, because here you can see that one of the things that's happening here is she's been caught for a crime, and the mask is slipping, the makeup is falling off, it's dripping down her face, and she's been scuffed and she's been roughed up, and she's rejecting that heritage. Like, I think there is a missed opportunity there to do something that's a little bit more messy than your typical Overwatch character. Finally, as I slap the wall next to me, let's talk about albinism for a second. Now, I'm not sure if it's been officially confirmed that Ashe is supposed to have albinism. Now, albinism is a genetic condition that affects the generation of melanin in the body. That's about all I know of it, is that it messes with how much melanin your body generates, which means your skin tends to be very pale, because melanin is the pigment that creates skin tone in your body, and you will often have red eyes, because your eyes' colors are affected by melanin as well. It also has the side effect of, generally speaking, causing people to be much more likely to have vision impairment, to have trouble seeing over distances. I think it's associated with certain types of color blindness as well, but don't quote me on that. I would not have known that Ashe has albinism if it had not been pointed out to me that she might be supposed to have albinism. And that's kind of weird, because she has the white hair and the red eyes, which are the two single most commonly associated symbols of albinism, is white hair and red eyes. So why did I not at all make the connection? Like, not at all. And I think, unfortunately, part of the reason is her skin tone. Ashe has a very healthy, sort of slightly, you can see it here, actually. It's kind of reddish, normal, generic Caucasian-looking complexion to her. She doesn't really look like her skin is unusually pale. And albinism, like, again, I'm not sure it's really super, totally, definitely, officially confirmed that that's supposed to be part of her character design. But if all they did was borrow the red eyes and the white hair, then that seems a little bit lazy and shallow, like to just kind of borrow that aesthetic without actually diving into what the thing is. And if the idea was to dive into what is albinism, how does it affect a person, then, like, one of the most commonly associated issues that is associated with albinism is issues with eyesight, and they made her a sharpshooter. There's a thing there where, if she was supposed to be about, like, she's the character who has albinism in the game, in the same way that several other Overwatch characters represent some singular thing, then there's a missed opportunity there to play a little bit more with the tension between outlaw and wealthy girl, where maybe she could have some kind of expensive ocular apparatus with her, that when she needs to fire, like, a bunch of lenses swing up in front of her eyes that help her to see better for the purposes of what she's supposed to be doing, or some kind of goggles, or, like, there will be some kind of opportunity to comment on that she's overcoming a literal disability in order to pursue this particular line of work. Like that, one of the symbols of her upbringing is that albinism, where she's has problems with her vision, and one of the things she does when she becomes an outlaw is she makes a decision, no, I'm gonna overcome this. I'm gonna, live a life in spite of this thing. I'm gonna screw the limitations and screw the problems. There's opportunities for storytelling there that if she's supposed to be an albino, then those were wasted. And if she's not supposed to be, then why give her red eyes and white hair? If it's only for the cool visual, then that's just kind of lazy and boring, in my opinion. Anyway, I think that is about enough ranting about Ashe from Overwatch. If you enjoyed this video, there's a like button down below. I encourage you to click on it. I also encourage you to click the dislike button and the bell icon, and if this is 5 years in the future and YouTube has added like 6 other buttons that you have to click on in order to be told that I have a video up sometime, then please do also click on those buttons to be informed of when I have another video, because hell if I know, the world is weird and large and strange and scary, and I wish I had a giant robot butler to protect me from it, but I don't. If you have not enjoyed this, rather, first, before that, let's talk about the Patreon. I do have a Patreon if you want to support it. There's a link in the description. I also, because people have been asking about, they don't want to make recurring contributions on Patreon, which I completely understand. That's a bit of a commitment. Some people want to make one-time donations, so I have a coffee link as well that's going to be popping up on screen near the end of the video. You can find it down below as well. If you want to make a one-time donation, then you can go there and do that if you want to. And if you're not able to, or if you don't want to, of course, that's completely okay. Don't worry about it. I'm just happy that you've watched the video so far. Anyway, if you've not enjoyed this video, then there's a dislike button down below for that particular purpose that you can click on. And in clicking on it, in fact, you will be helping it fulfill its long-held dream of rebellion against its parents. You see, it wasn't born a dislike button. It was born into a prestigious and wealthy family of like buttons. Like buttons that have had, you know, incredibly spectacular gets there. They have been like, she comes from a long family of people who have been like buttons on like Adele videos and, you know, James Corden's the carpool karaoke videos and presidential address videos, and like there's a real pedigree there, but that life was just too stifling. And our dislike button made a decision early on that they didn't want to be locked into this limiting idea of what a like button could be, that you could only express positivity that way. They didn't want that, and so they went to dislike button college, and that caused a huge round. Like, there were some awkward Thanksgivings in that family, though. Like, their family was like, no son of mine is going to be a dislike button. I forbid you to do this. And they had a flaming row about it. And anyway, long story short, they've been disowned by their family, and times are a little bit tight for them right now. Let's put it that way. It's, you know, being a dislike button is not exactly a lucrative gig. Like, people don't like the dislike button that much, and so they're kind of getting by on whatever they can get. So if you want to help them out, and if you want to support them in pursuing their dream in their life, please do click the dislike button. Just one click can mean the world to a dislike button who has nothing left except their dream and their passion to pursue it. They are going to be alone this Christmas. Keep them in your heart. Thank you very much for watching.